May 24th to order. The only item on the agenda is the short-term disability plan for the City of Peru employees. We'll go ahead and mention right off the top that the Peru Police Department is under a contract with the city, and that agreement expires on December 31st, 2017. So the short-term disability that we're talking about here tonight is superseded until December 31st of 2017 by our previous agreement with the police department. As it stands, though, at the sunset of this is the de facto plan that then would cover all the city. So I appreciate our city employees that have come here tonight and to talk to us. Maybe, hopefully, we'll get a couple others to come in and share their opinion on it too. So with that, we'll go ahead and kind of go over real quickly what we have here. Just for purposes for, I think, public and the recording and minutes. And most of us have gone through this in some detail, so we're pretty familiar with what's in here. But real quickly, it is for injuries or illness that would happen not on duty. Anything on duty would be covered by workman's comp. The details of workman's comp is not part of anything in what we're deciding tonight. This is solely injuries and illness that occurs off duty or not at work, I guess. The way that we have it written right now is that if an employee were injured and they brought and then they used 10 days of their own personal time, sick time, comp time, vacation, that at that point then they would have a doctor's note that they would bring in and that would state that they should be on short-term disability. At that point, it would trigger an automatic second opinion paid for by the city. If the two opinions didn't agree, it would go to a third mutually agreed upon doctor with a cost split between the employee and the city. That third opinion would then, by nature, be the deciding opinion. After that, it's as it's written, 2/3 of the base pay of the employee would be paid, and that would be for up to 50 weeks. After that, it would go into some kind of long-term or disability policy. I think the parts of this that we'll probably have some discussion about, I know Detective Feller and I have talked about this some, is the percentage of the base pay that would be paid. Also, in this version, it does say that you have to use vacation time too. And I know previously that wasn't one of that was like the one exempt thing in the list of stuff that you had to use. So we could talk about that too, because I don't know, Tish, do you know at what point that changed in here?
That was actually the first redo.
Okay. So.
Because one of the labor lawyers that I was in discussion with said that it's unheard of to not use your vacation first.
Gotcha.
And so, yeah, she recommended that we did that.
Do you want to add anything before we
I'll
Tish?
just see what questions come our way and answer them if I can.
Matt, I know we've had a lot of discussion about this. Would you like to talk to the board about what's going on here?
I'm trying to, just so I'm clear, what you just, I've not had an opportunity yet to browse this. So is this plan what will take effect January 1 of 2018?
So the current contract with the FOP ends ends on December 31st of this year. So then next year, I mean, that's not the only thing that we have in our agreement with the FOP. Vacation days is also in there. The extra day for the fitness day, and a couple other items are in here. We have discussed too about the vacation days changing next year, so that would change in this. Obviously, we're talking about the short-term disability, which I think would have a significant impact on the agreement we have currently with the FOP. But there are some other things within the FOP contract that I think would probably be unaffected. So we would want to go back, revisit this agreement with the FOP about the benefits with the police department. But obviously, it's quite a bit's changing next year.
And this takes effect for the rest of the city upon passing. Your contract that was already agreed upon with the mayor supersedes this. So it would be, whenever your contract comes up for renegotiation in January, it would be at that point that you negotiate what you see fit.
Well, I guess that would be, speaking on behalf of the FOP, that would be our intention. I think as we discussed earlier was, we have an agreement now until the end of this year. And so for 2018, it would be our intention to negotiate quite possibly on some of the terms of this particular policy that you're passing, in all likelihood to pass tonight. So, I mean, as long as the FOP doesn't necessarily have an issue with passing this, as long as we have an opportunity under the meet and confer law, under state statute, that we will be able to sit down and talk about the terms of this and talk about potential changes on both sides, quite frankly, whether it be the city or the changes that the city would want or changes that the FOP would want for 2018.
Yeah, and I would say that with that in mind, that we would be going back at another time with the FOP to update the agreement that here. That I know, as it stands now, I would be very hesitant to change very much from the overall city policy. I think there would have to be a very good reason to deviate from, as far as this goes, to deviate from what's the overall city policy for employees. So I would say, I would push hard to keep as far as the short-term disability, in line with the rest of the city.
So any on-duty injury or any on-duty illness, anything like that, would also be compensated at 66 2/3%.
So,
by workman's compensation, correct?
right,
So basically, it's 66 2/3% across the board.
as it stands now,
As it
yes.
stands now. And I can tell you, being very upfront, is that would be a point of contention that the FOP will have for 2018.
Right.
Is the level of compensation for, quite frankly, either one of them. As we've said before, our concern is there are things, obviously, that come up. We know that. Where there are illnesses that are beyond anybody's control.
Right.
And in our, not just speaking for the police department, but thinking just generally in terms of the employees, especially, if somebody gets cancer or something like that, our position would be that we would like to make sure that our employees get the treatment that they need, that they get themselves healthy and hopefully come back to work, but at the same time not have to worry about keeping the lights on in their house and putting food on their families' tables while they're trying to get well.
Yeah.
So, like I said, that's, I can just tell you now that will be a source of something that we will want to negotiate for 2018. Whether we come to an agreement on that or not is, we'll see what's in the cards down the road. But no, as of right now, as long as our contract for 2017 is being honored, then we're satisfied with that at this point.
Okay. And I understand your points, and I understand your position on that. Like I said, I would push hard for it to be, at least in the short-term disability area of the FOP contract, for it to be uniform with the city, the rest of the city employees. So I would say that, and I hate to tell you, well, make your case now because it's going to matter a lot later when we negotiate this. But in reality, it's kind of, I'm very glad you're here tonight to make a case for this, for what the police department would want as far as the benefits, because I would really prefer a uniform short-term disability for the city. So a couple of things, just to kind of let everybody know maybe some of the thought process and how we came to these conclusions. As you mentioned with the on-the-job workman's compensation, the workman's comp for the police and fire is through the state PERF. The PERF program, whatever the city would kick in with PERF, congruent with PERF, for an on-the-job injury, the state would deduct any benefit from its 2/3 benefit. Let me see if I can say this clearly. The state's 2/3 benefit, whatever the city put in, they would deduct it from their 2/3 down to 0. So basically, if there was to be any kind of greater than 2/3 base pay payment for on the job, it would be 100% funded by the city. So the concern with that is the city paying into PERF and not getting the full benefit out of PERF, because we're basically negating any state PERF input when it comes to the salary part of the benefit, if we want to go above 66 and a 2/3%. Is that, I know it's about clear as mud.
So what you're saying then is that anytime that there's an on-duty injury, that runs through PERF, correct? For short-term and for long-term? Or are we covered under a workman's compensation insurance policy covered by the city, that's purchased by the city?
Well, with the police and fire, the workman's comp, am I correct, Tish? That goes through PERF no matter what. It's separate from the civil employees, and so the state rules for PERF and workman's comp apply there. It's not dependent on the plan that we choose as a city. It's kind of chosen for us.
Okay.
And workman's comp states that you would make 2/3, 66 and 2/3% of your earnings, and that's it. When we looked into it, we were hoping to subsidize that and bring it up to 100%.
Right.
Workman's comp says you can't do that. They want workers to have an incentive to come back to work. So if we were to subsidize the city and make up for that 1/3%, then basically what we're doing is promoting that person that's off to draw workman's compensation for longer. So they do not want us to do that.
So are you saying that PERF is saying that, or
Workman's comp.
workman's comp for civilian employees?
And I'm not sure about PERF, but I know that the systems, the programs are set up to kind of run equally the same way. So I know that you have a PERF attorney, or someone, a Blackwell or a Blackman, or
He is the FOP attorney.
FOP that is really good and informed with PERF things. I would recommend that you definitely ask him that question, but civil workman's comp says that 2/3% is all they can pay.
Okay, so explain to me then what PERF says for police and fire, because we operate out of an entirely
Right.
different fund. Our disability and retirement fund for police officers and firefighters in the state of Indiana operates as its sole entity, separate from civilian PERF.
So,
Right.
and that's what I just said. I would encourage you, if you're going to come back and negotiate this, to see what your attorney tells you. I perf is very confusing, especially for somebody that's been doing it, a year and 4 months, a year and 5 months. But it's my understanding through the labor law attorneys that I've worked with that the programs are set up to be the same, meaning workman's compensation and the perf short-term disability, that they're set up to mirror each other. So with that statement from her, I was assuming that it's probably the same as workman's comp, which is 66 2/3.
So has anyone in drafting this policy for the police department, the fire department, actually spoken with PERF for the firefighters and police officers?
We have had attorneys. We have had attorneys pretty much doing this entire draft for us because this is way more complicated than it seems. It was to our best benefit that we've had seasoned attorneys that do this specifically. This is their area of expertise to do this.
So the short answer, we didn't directly speak to PERF on this. The attorneys that we consulted with on this deal with PERF, and so we're going on their recommendation, assuming that since they deal with PERF, does that make sense?
I could be wrong, but I believe that when, this has been a few years since we've had to do this, but I believe that when you have a disability within the police department, the pension board has to convene and they have to determine what classification you have of a disability. You either have a class 1, class 2, or class 3. And I believe it's 55, 45, 35% that you can grant
Right.
that employee. So I guess that's where my concern is, that you're saying it's 66
Well-
2/3. Why is it? The
Now-
state law says 55% is the max.
Well, because I believe that's the long-term disability, and the short-term's different.
Okay.
And I don't know, but I believe that's, when you go to the pension board for those brackets that you mentioned, to my knowledge, that's for long-term. Does that sound correct to you too, Matt?
I think so.
Okay. Very good.
I think for long-term, yes, all that stuff runs through the pension board. The police department has a pension board, the fire department has a pension board as well, and all that, at least with the long-term, I do know runs through the pension boards. I'm not familiar with short-term, we've never had to deal with that before. So this is all unfamiliar territory to
Right.
me as well.
Right.
But you had mentioned something about the city wouldn't be getting their value out of PERF?
Well, so
I'm
this,
interested in
yeah,
what
so,
you meant by that.
right, so, the thinking behind that is, so the city pays into PERF a set amount by the state, and we have to pay that. We can't change the policy with them, right?
So, and the employees also pay into that as well.
Yeah, correct. So,
City pays more into perf for police and fire than they do civil.
That's correct. But
Right.
the city's portion of that decreased by 2% in 2017, correct?
I believe so,
Yes.
Right.
from 19 to 17, something like that.
Along those lines.
Yeah, so, but the idea is, so the city's paying into it, employees paying into it, and we can't change the terms of the benefit. And as it's described to us, the benefit will only go to 66% for short-term disability. So if we say, we want to get you to 100%, we'll be paying 100% of that 100%. PERF won't pay for 2/3 of that. So that the city's paying up 1/3 and PERF's paying 2/3. Because as we pay, as we fill it, they drop out.
So what I would challenge you on when it comes to that is, to put this into perspective, and it's not necessarily a problem that the city has created, but if you think back, and I'm not sure if you're familiar, there was an Indianapolis police officer who was killed, I think, in the mid-2000s, who has ties to Peru, Indiana, and there were other police officers who were shot there. When they had to go on disability, they had issues meeting their financial obligations. So, if we have a police officer who, God forbid, were to get shot, through no fault of their own, granted, we know the dangers when we take our job, but I'm only going to get 66 2/3 of my pay if I get shot. Or if a fireman who is inside fighting a structure fire has something collapse on them, they're only going to get 66 2/3%.
And like I said, that's set up per the state.
I understand that.
You know what I mean?
That's set up for the state in terms of the compensation, but
Right.
what I would say is, yeah, it saves the city money that goes back into the general fund at the end of it, but I would think that we would want our public safety to be 100% funded should something happen to us. while we're working.
I'm going to jump in there and speak just on behalf of myself here and say that we want every single employee to be taken care of, not just public safety, every single employee. And I can tell you that this is something that I printed off from the Workman's Comp website, and just a little Q&A, and it says, does Workman's Comp cover only injuries, or does it cover long-term problems and illnesses? It says your injury need not be caused by an accident, such as a fall from a ladder, to be covered by workman's compensation. Many workers receive compensation for injuries that are caused by overuse and misuse over a long period of time. For example, repetitive stress injuries such as carpal tunnel syndrome, chronic back problems, etc. And so with that in mind, I would like to talk about the street department for a little bit. They're kind of unsung heroes here. They don't get a lot of credit for what they do, and they work just as hard as anyone else. And I know from getting on and off of the trucks all of the time, putting their hands in garbage cans that could potentially have syringes, dirty syringes in them. You know, they put themselves out there as well. And what I think is good about this policy is it treats everyone equally for everything that they give the city, because no one department could run this city without the other departments. So,
and let me jump in too. So let me kind of like reconstruct the path and the kind of how we got here. So I know when we had talked to the police department, obviously it's in your contract, that or is it in this one? Is this one on the job too?
That was our understanding, but I don't think that it's completely spelled out.
Yeah, because this policy that's 6 pages and for the city is 1 paragraph, so I think there's some holes in some of the information here, because I guess it doesn't differentiate between on the job and off the job in your contract. Yeah. So I don't know if you want to look, there's the paragraph that deals with it in their contract. So coming into this, we wanted to fund any on-the-job injury for anyone, any city employee, to 100%. It's the way that we believe it had been done in the past, and we wanted to get that benefit to the city employees, all of them. As we tried to do that, and we explained to the attorneys and everybody else that this is what we were going to do for that, and then like the thing that we had last year going into negotiations with FOP is 100% off the job too. When we came to the kind of the brick wall that we couldn't figure out how to get past, which was let's get on the job compensation up to 100%, we couldn't figure out how to get there because of the hurdles that PERF and Workman's Comp and the attorneys that we asked to help us with this told us was there. So, and even before we discovered that hurdle, as far as we don't think we can get it to that 100% for on-the-job injury, I know I was saying, and from other people I was talking to, felt that on-the-job and off-the-job injuries should be differentiated, and that on-the-job injuries should be held, at more of a premium to the employee versus getting hurt off the job. And it was something that I really felt like if you get hurt on the job, the city should stand by you even more strongly than if there was something that happened at home. Once we found out that when you're injured on the job working for the city, that you could only get up to 2/3 pay, it didn't seem right to me that getting hurt off the job would get paid more than getting hurt on the job. And so that's kind of the steps that got us to this.
So you've spoken with labor attorneys, obviously. What is the liability to the city to funding the employees who are hurt on, while they're working?
Right.
What's the liability there to the city?
Staffing. So it would be getting the staff to make up for the person that was out. And I know, with the police department, it might be easier to fill in staffing, but like say my assistant Josh was out, that would be a huge burden on my office, and I don't know how, if Josh was out for 6 weeks or something like that, honestly, I don't know how I would get by up there. I mean, that would be really difficult for me. I think most of the departments would say that if they had an employee that they were paying for, 6 months, 6 weeks, that would be quite a burden on them. They would have to pay quite a bit of overtime or something to be able to fill in the gap in work.
So, and Chief Meeks can probably speak to this just as much as I can. I cannot think of a time in the 15 years that I've worked for the Peru Police Department where we have had to pay overtime or to cover a shift for an officer who's been injured, sick, or even for that matter on vacation somewhere. If there is, it's been a very, very rare occasion. So when we say that this should be uniform, we're really not talking about apples to apples when we compare the different departments. While we all do different jobs that are all vital and they all kind of link together, it's definitely not the same for the police department as what it is for some other departments where they may have to do that. We have the capability to move our scheduling around, make things work, that we would say that if staffing is the liability, we don't really have that issue.
Are you overstaffed?
No.
If you have that
Absolutely
comfort,
not.
that padding, are you overstaffed?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Let me just draw me a picture of how you can do it without paying overtime if you're not overstaffed.
Chief?
Hi, Mike.
Great management, I guess we have to start with them.
You're just really good at your job.
That's a hard one, when you first put me on the spot like that. Yeah, I think it is. I think it is in the way you manage your people, and the way that we have our schedules set up. We have to have, I know like with the fire department, I know they have to have X amount of people so that they can cover certain shifts. And we're the exact same way. I mean, we have to have, in order for us to have, with the days off that we have to schedule, with the schooling that we have, with the patrols that we have to have, I don't feel that we are overstaffed. Now, that's not to say if a guy goes down, I mean, our guys are going to be limited on days off. They may have to carry days over to the next year. So that's the issue that we would see.
What do you
We
think
may
that would
have to
do
go-
for morale
Pardon?
if they didn't get the days off that they wanted because of this person being out? What do you think that would do? I'm just wondering. I think that it wouldn't be as nice, obviously, if someone were out injured. I mean, if someone wasn't getting the days off that they wanted or needed, or if they had to completely change their schedule, I think that may hurt morale a little bit. So there is a price to pay in this. Even if it's just...
What I would say is probably when you talk about the fire service and you talk about the police department, that it's an entirely different animal than probably anywhere else that you've ever worked.
Oh, I'm sure.
And it's very difficult to explain it, but we're more like family than anything else. We may have infighting like brothers and sisters do, but at the end of the day, if we know that we have one of our brother or sister officers who's out, who's injured, who has something going on, particularly if we have an on-duty injury, if one of our guys
Right.
gets shot, I don't think that you will ever have an issue where we say, you know what, I want my vacation time, and I don't care that this guy took a bullet and is sitting at home laid up.
Right.
We will probably, in fact, what I can tell you is we've had issues with officers even this year where they needed to be off, and guys chipped in and volunteered to say, we will cover this guy's shift. If there is a potential that he can't have that time off, but he needs to be with his family, we will volunteer. We had 29 police officers, and there were 28 police officers out of 29 who stepped up to the plate and said, we will volunteer our time to this officer to work for him or do whatever we need to do for him to make sure that he gets the time off that he needs to be with his family. So to say that it would hurt morale for an on-duty injury, I just don't see that. You may see it for
I
somebody
asked
with
if it would
off-duty,
hurt.
but
I
not
didn't.
on-duty.
And I completely, I completely respect everything you do. I'm just kind of trying to look at every angle here. I'm playing devil's advocate a little, if you will, just to see where we're at.
And the only reason that we're
And I
having-
want you to understand, I know I will never understand what it's like to be a police officer or a firefighter, but you need to understand I know the mayor and I both went into this full throttle trying to give that 100%, and we were hit by a brick wall. It isn't something that we were like, we're going to act like we tried, but we're not. It's not like that at all. So I would ask of you to put yourself in our shoes a little bit as well and know that this is something that has to be done. So.
You'd said something about, excuse me, Mayor, you'd said something about that workman's comp covers the 66 and 2/3. And that, I think, I don't know if your term was they frown upon the city giving the other 33 and 1/3.
No, they will take it away. They will, if we gave the other, they will only allow you to be up, well, basically 2/3. So if we tried to kick in that other third, they would back it off a third. You're only going to get 2/3 either way. I guess.
The city would have to pay the whole 100%.
But the city's already budgeted for that whole 100%.
Right. And then the issue then becomes that in trying to keep a uniform policy, that other departments outside of the police department would be they'd be adversely affected by that much greater. And I think probably just thinking out loud, maybe the difference with the police department and the staffing is that you have 3 shifts that, street department has 1 shift. So if they are geared to have guys out on 1 shift and they lose a guy, that's why maybe that hurts more versus you got 3 shifts, you pull someone off another shift, and you have a lot more flexibility with 3 shifts versus any other department. Even the fire department that has a 24-hour service too, their shifts are completely structured different to where it affects them greater when they have someone down. So just kind of thinking out loud, I would say that's probably how it's easier versus the other departments.
Sure. I mean, I can even look at Matt and say, if we have a shortage on one of our shifts, I can pull Matt out of detectives, but then that lessens our detectiving ability there, you know what I mean? Our cases maybe are going to get taken care of, our public service is going to go down. So, yeah, we can pull from other resources within our department, but I can agree with what you're saying too.
In your research for this, if I recall correctly, you have reached out to other cities to see what type of policies they have, correct?
Tish, did you reach out?
Well, yes.
I reached out about
And
the,
I-
I'm sorry, go
I
ahead.
can tell you that I've been to quite a bit of training in the last month and a half, 2 months, working up to this. We've been working on this a while. And in the discussions that I've had with the other clerk treasurers from around the city, they are absolutely flabbergasted of the benefits that the city offers in total. And they couldn't imagine that we would, a couple of them even acted like, I can't believe the gall of the city to try to offer 100% because that's taxpayers' dollars, and why would you do that? I mean, I've gotten actually a lot of pushback and negativity from other clerk treasurers when I've even suggested this. So.
But we could go and say we've got a lot of pushback when we talk about our pay to other departments.
You're right.
About our pay to other departments. We
Right,
know
but
we're a lower
I
police
challenge
department,
you, as the police department, to go to any other city and compare apples to apples when it comes to your benefit package. You will not find a richer benefit package anywhere. And we understand that you are not paid like a Carmel police officer is paid. However, the money savings of the city paying 100% of your medical, the family's medical, and things like that, that has a lot of value as well. So I would encourage you to take that into consideration and then go compare.
Well, and that's, to speak to his point, because I think as the mayor is well aware, in running for office, you knew coming into this that we were, if not the lowest paid police department of our size in the state of Indiana, we are
Right.
certainly among the lowest.
Yep.
And so the trade-off with the city over time, for good, bad, or ugly, has always been that because the city could not afford to pay us more,
Right.
that we were generously compensated with our benefits.
And that's
We're
not
appreciative
changing,
of
and
that.
that's not changing. I mean, there's still, our tax base isn't really growing. We're not really taking in any more money than they did. So they compensated you with benefits because they knew they couldn't pay you as well. Well, as far as the money stands, that hasn't changed that much, and if anything, the finances are a little worse off because of property tax caps and things like that. So I'm very proud of the city being able to offer you guys that kind of benefits. Everyone, I think it's a wonderful benefit. I just don't want you to forget about that benefit when you are looking at other towns and what they earn, I guess.
It's a
So,
big picture thing.
yeah.
But I
And
think
we
you-
appreciate
you-
everything
You
you
find
do.
a lot of our guys would trade in some of their benefits for more pay.
I'm sure,
So
I'm
it's-
sure,
it's-
yeah.
It is, it's a give and take.
Right.
both ways.
And I
And
bet
to
those are
that
the
point,
healthy
though,
guys,
too, you know,
know?
that's kind of like what we're talking about here, to that point, is, okay, if we really push to try to get pay up, you know, at what point would the benefits drop off, too? You know, in that scenario, trading benefits for pay. I guess, did that make sense?
But then, because we've always, kind of like Captain Feller just stated, over the years, we've given up that opportunity to get paid for more benefits. So it's
Right.
almost like we're trading it back in, and we're almost getting double.
Right, right, you're trading it back in, not for the full benefit of it back in your
What it should
pay.
have been back then, correct?
Right. And I understand that.
Okay.
So in reaching out to these other cities, in any research that you've done, are there any other cities that have separate policies when it comes to short-term disability for their public servants, or not necessarily public service, but public safety versus civilians?
I haven't reached out directly about short-term disability. I reached out about paternity and maternity leave. And so now, anecdotally, I believe that it was mentioned that I think Kokomo might do that. But as far as like a survey of other cities, I couldn't
haven't really
say.
found any. As a matter of fact, what most of them told me is, why would you want to administer that yourself? You know, most of them would just rather pay the Hartford or someone, because whenever they have the Hartford, then that's also an administrator. You know, you send in your claims to them. And a benefit of us keeping this in-house is, I think that it would cut out the middleman a little bit, and you wouldn't have to worry about when that paycheck was going to come and things like that. So it's still a step in the right direction, I believe. But most of them are happy to let it be outsourced and administered by that company.
So, is there, Colton or anybody from the board?
I'm just soaking it all in. There's a lot to retain.
It's
Yeah.
tough.
And it is.
This has been the most challenging thing that I've seen so far.
And it seems like every day we've gotten new information too that
Right.
was like, oh, well, that changes that.
Right.
So, and the situation is what it is. I don't know how we get around it being what it has come to be now. But, you know, as you guys know, the current short-term disability insurance policy that the city's under is due to expire on June 1st. That's why we're doing this now, to make sure that this covers, this policy would fill in as that drops off. So, you know, we're a bit under the gun, the city as a whole, to hammer this out and get it done. I think another thing to take into consideration too is that being able to defend everything we do to the public. And, you know, making the strong case that we're being as responsible as we possibly can be, while still treating the employees as fairly as possible with the taxpayers' money. Is this, would Matt and Mike Golden, would you guys agree that philosophically, or as a rule of thumb, that it should be less, ideally, to be the benefits if you're hurt off the job than on the job?
I think that's a very broad question. Again, you know, it's one thing if I'm skydiving and I injure myself doing something extreme. It's an entirely different thing, in my opinion. We've been very blessed at the police department over the years that we've had only one police officer that I can think of has been afflicted with something like cancer over the course of the 15 years I've been here. Fortunately enough for him, at that point, he was able to have surgery, have everything taken care of, and be back to work within a pretty short span of time. When you look traditionally at the policies that the city had for the former policy that we had starting in like 2006 or 2007, that was from a firefighter who had cancer and passed away from cancer. And and he was off and on over the course of somewhere in the neighborhood of 9 months before he passed away. So to say the level of compensation shouldn't be the same, there are definitely things that happen that are well beyond our control. That's not me out doing something stupid or something that I shouldn't be doing or something that I know I'm putting myself in harm's way for when I'm not working versus looking at things like that. And so, our hope would be, as it was when we negotiated the contract we have, is just that the city is going to stand side by side with the employees that we have and say, we are here to support you. We want you to be at home. We want you to rehab, do whatever you've got to do to get yourself better, to get yourself back to work. Because I can tell you right now that if I am only earning 66 2/3% of my pay, regardless of whether it's on duty or off duty, first of all, I'm stir crazy, so I could not sit at home for that long. But secondly, I also can't afford to pay my bills on 66 2/3% of my salary. So I will probably lie, cheat, and steal to make sure that I get myself back to work. And in our line of work, in the fire department's line of work, when we come back to work still injured, not well, then we put our coworkers in danger, and quite frankly, the people that we're trying to protect, we put in danger.
Yeah.
So you run the risk. I mean, it's a give and take. I get the fact that there's a concern on the part of the city administration that you don't want employees taking advantage of a policy to their advantage, where taxpayer money is going to fund somebody who could very easily be at work. The flip side of that is you don't want police officers and firefighters coming to work hurt. And that's a real challenge
Right.
for some of us.
And I will say that I think that what we have in this plan, as far as basically 3 doctors are going to, 2 out of 3 are going to have to agree that the employee should be on disability. And given that even I think before the 2 out of 3 was in this policy and the way the policy was with the city before that, it wasn't as stringent to make sure that the employee was truly disabled. There wasn't evidence of it being abused. There wasn't evidence of it being an issue. The more I've looked at this and the more time's gone on, the less concerned I am about abuse, because I think it really is buttoned down tight. I think that the larger issue is, well, I wouldn't say the larger issue, but I think the thing to keep in mind is when we're representing the entire community, and would the entire community agree with you that yes, that's what we believe should happen? And I'm not saying that, if we took a poll of the community and they said yes, that's what we think should happen with the police department, it might be. And I guess we're just trying to use our best judgment to say what's the will of the entire community on this too. But I don't want to be outside of what average Joe on the street would say. No, that's crazy. Like, why are you doing that? I guess does that make sense?
It makes sense. I don't know what the view of the public would be, but what I can tell you with respect to on-duty injuries is that I think that the public is going to stand with their police officers and their firefighters. Unfortunately, I've been to several police officers' funerals, and one as recently as last year. And for, how long was the procession? Like 6 miles?
Yeah.
And it was packed for 6 miles. So I think that gives you probably a general idea of what the average tax-paying citizen thinks of their police officers and what they would probably think about a police officer who gets shot and only getting 66 2/3%. I'd be interested to talk to Deputy Buckley, who was shot and returned to work, to see how he would have been compensated by Howard County had he had to take a more extended period of time off. So I think that by and large, when it's on-duty injuries for police and fire, I think the public's going to stand behind their police officers and their firefighters. That something like that happens, I would think that they would want us to get paid because we get injured or hurt doing exactly what you are paying us to do.
Right.
And because of that, I think that it would be a bad thing to say, because you got injured, doing what we pay you to do and what we ask you to do, that you should only get a portion of what you were already getting paid.
And, you know, as far as the workman's comp and the reimbursement for on-the-job injuries, and keep in mind, we're not voting on that tonight. And we've gone over the issues with getting it past the 66 or the 2/3% pay. Honestly, I don't feel like that's a hurdle that is completely unpassable to get past. The question is, if we do fund the your wages for on the job, the city funds that at 100% or at 100% of whatever the benefit is, if that benefit is 80%, you know, but it's all city fund. Is that best use of the taxpayers' dollars? I think there is an argument that it is, honestly. The money paid into PERF, the money paid into the civilian end of the insurance, I don't think it's a completely I don't think it's an obstacle that we can't come over to make sure that that works. I do honestly hold out some hope that we can get the on-the-job up to higher than 66. Tish, I don't know, your experiences, how you feel about that too?
Oh, you know how I feel about it. We would love to. We can find a way to do it. We will. We're not sitting here saying that we did not want to do this. It's that we haven't found a way to do it. But that doesn't mean that we'll stop trying. I'm 100% with the mayor on this.
And along those lines too, with on-the-job injuries, and I understand, you know, you're shot on the job and you're off work. A firefighter's injured, a roof fell in on them on the job, and they're making medical bills and they still have a mortgage and a car payment. They've got those expenses. I understand that, and honestly, I mean, even for any other city employee that's on the job and gets injured, you know, because of what they're doing, I want them to I want them to be able to pay their bills and come back to work and not have to worry about, you know, can I make my rent this month? Am I going to get evicted? So I do want to continue to work to try to get on-the-job benefits, if not 100% close to it, and close enough to where an employee wouldn't say, oh gosh, now I'm going to lose my car, I'm going to lose my house, and something along those lines.
I would hope it would never come to this, but I would hope that a policeman would never say, I'm not going to run in the woods and get that bad guy because I can't afford to get hurt. Or a fireman say, I'm not going to go in that house and try to save these people because I'm not going to have a roof on the top of me.
Right.
I hope that will never happen. I've never heard anybody say it.
Right.
So I just want to leave it at that too. I just
Right.
don't, because we have to worry about our family too at home.
Yeah,
We have
and
to worry about our things at home too. So I just hope that it never comes to that. So that would be another thing.
Absolutely.
I would encourage you to make it so maybe that mindset never comes into a person's mind that they don't want to do what you've employed us to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if it's never said audibly, you know, the voice in the back of your head is always going, and it would, you know. So with that saying, and I don't know how the rest of the board feels about that, but like I said, I think we can overcome that, and I think that we can do better than 66 with the on-duty injuries. It's obviously far more complicated and more difficult than what we initially thought it would be to do that. I still think, though, that off-the-job injuries shouldn't be at the level of on-the-job. I think there should be a differentiation between the two.
Could we ever, and I agree with what Matt has said about it being so broad, is there a difference between injuries and illnesses?
Right.
I don't know if there's something that's in the medical world that divides those in half and says these could be compensated, like Matt has referred to, cancer versus
Right.
Skydiving.
Yeah, and I know that we had open enrollment before where extra insurance was provided through the city that also had a premium for the employee too, but was provided through the city for a cancer insurance. Can you expand on that at all, Tish?
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up, because another good thing about this passing or being considered or whatever now when it is we are still currently in open enrollment until May 31st. And I know that a lot of people knew that this was coming up, and I know that everybody met with Mr. Talukian with the open enrollment. So I don't know if anyone maybe dropped some coverage that they wouldn't have normally dropped had they not known this was coming up. And so I wanted to make sure that if they had done that and they changed their mind and maybe want to get that cancer policy back, they still have time to do that.
Well, I can speak for myself in the meeting that I was required to attend with them, that what was told to me was I had a supplemental short-term disability policy in place, and I was specifically told I no longer needed that policy because of the change in the short-term disability.
And he was absolutely right about that, Matt. And I have a copy of this short-term disability policy that he was talking about right here. You do not need this any longer because if you look at it, it is also 2/3. It is 66.5%, or
I'm not talking about the
2%.
short-term that we had citywide. I'm talking about supplemental that they offered to us that I paid. a
Because it was
portion of.
covering the same thing that our new policy is covering. So you didn't need it.
It was my understanding that the insurance that I purchased was to supplement my income, should I have to go on short-term disability.
Was it an AFLAC or
Not Aflac, it was through American
American Fidelity? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know which.
It was the same thing I bought, and was also told, you don't need it, drop it, so, I mean, I did the same.
Well, and I can tell you, and that's why I brought it up. It's not too late to get that back. I mean, we went into this hoping and trying to do 100%. It's what we went in to do, and that's proof right there that there's, that was our intention the entire time. But because of the rules and regulations that we found and that we ran into, now this is what it is because this is what we were able to do. So you do still have until the 31st of this month to go back and start that additional coverage back up if you choose to do so. So,
Now, and then, I keep on mentioning this, but I want to reiterate it. We're not going to decide anything on workman's comp or on the job injuries now, but I would like to talk to the board about it in the future, when we do come to that point, when we are making that decision for on the job injuries. What is the feeling of, I respect both of your guys' opinions on this stuff. That's why you guys are on the board. And
I think without a doubt, if an officer or a fireman gets hurt trying to save somebody, doing their job that they're forced to do, I don't know why they wouldn't be compensated if there's a way to get to that point. Like you said,
100%.
I listen to Tish, and it's going to be a nightmare if this comes to that, but looking at it that way, and yes, all employees are the same way, like you bringing up that the trash man reached down and grabbed a bag of trash and sticks some needle in his hand and contracts AIDS because of it. That's not any different than what these gentlemen do every day. But at the same time, I agree with not having, or having a difference in the coverage off the job. I think that if you're paid to do this job, and you should be protected, and the city should back these people.
as far as on the job injuries, what level do you feel comfortable, Kristen?
I think I'd better have a dang good reason to say anything less than 100%. And I think that's what you guys are struggling with, is that you have the full intention of it being 100% and are just finding that as far as the math is going and as far as legalities are going, it's hard for us to add that together.
And I think that, I don't see any reason why for the civilian part of the city employees that we couldn't get an insurance policy that would make sense with workman's comp to say, we're taking care of the wage part of the benefit, that would be taken into consideration with the premium, so that we're not double paying for the wage benefit. So the city's paying it and we're paying for an insurance company to cover a wage too. I don't see why we can't do that.
I'm sorry, you lost me there. Are you talking about you don't see why we can't get a policy that will supplement the workman's comp? Is that what you're saying? Because that's what
Why-
we just found out that we can't do, which is why we're in this situation right now.
Right, no, why we can't get a insurance policy that would take into account in the premium that insurance policy would never pay for the wages.
Gotcha.
So that seems like something we should be able to get to. We haven't got there yet with the lawyers
Right.
and the people we've talked to.
Right?
I still think there's no reason why we can't get there. As far as the PERF and the public safety employees and them being governed by a state, you know, it was brought up earlier today that the money that we pay into PERF goes for retirement and these other things. So it's hard to really pinpoint what part of what we're paying goes into
Well, and that's a good question to ask that we need to ask, but it was something that we've talked and worked our way through this every single day, and every single day a different point comes up. But the purpose of PERF is to pay into a retirement. The general purpose is to pay into retirement, but there is some portion of what we pay in that goes towards disabilities and things like that. So we need to do more research on our part to figure out what that percentage is. So, yeah, there's absolutely more legwork to do
Yeah.
on our part, yeah.
But I think if I'm reading the mood of the board correctly, we do want to get on-the-job injuries to 100. I think that's
I'd
what
like to see, if it's possible, yes.
Right.
yeah. So I think that's what that should be the goal for us going into the on-the-job injuries part. This being off the job and going on the presumption that we're going to go for 100% for on-the-job, but still I think the mood is that off-the-job should be a different rate. Then the question becomes, if we want to pass this tonight, I think that's the sticking point then, is what's that rate? I think that we would like to see it below 100%, and obviously at 60 or 2/3%, you feel like it would be too much of a burden for an employee. Given that if it was something like cancer or a sickness like that, that there would be other options available to get you up to a higher rate in that event. What is the percent rate that we should be going for the off the job percentage paid?
With the set of guidelines established of what qualifies you for that.
Right. Yeah, with these guidelines established, I think the part that is left to be determined is if the city is going to go above and beyond on the job and make sure that we get 100% for on the job, but we, in theory, agree that off the job should be at a rate below that. What is that fair rate below 100% for off the job injuries? Because I do feel like it should be differentiated.
With exclusions of something out of your control.
Well, I think that if it's something under your control, it would still be on the employees. It would be the onus of the employee to get extra insurance to cover, say, cancer.
That's like a theoretical question.
Mhm.
Since the cops are a very unique situation, so what if he was off duty, but someone that the captain's investigating, like, comes to his house and, like, God forbid, shoots him because of that? So he gets hurt because of what he was doing on the duty, but now technically he's off duty. How would that play into it?
I've never been, that situation's never been talked about. I would assume that would still be off the duty. I don't know if you guys know any different, or,
Are you ever really off duty? You're off the
There's
all the
that.
time.
That's a difficult question to answer, Steve. We are available by SOP. We are to be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Obviously, you know, if I'm on vacation out of state, I'm not available to the city realistically. However, to speak to your point, while I may be off duty, I think that spectrum perhaps changes, and it would have to be perhaps something that's written into policy by the city, that if I'm acting even off duty under the color of law, I still have the authority when I'm not technically on duty to enforce the state laws of the state of Indiana, or to protect myself, or to protect a third party. So I would say that if I'm acting under the color of law, then I should be in theory on duty. And I think that perhaps by federal guidelines, that would be, if I were acting off duty and under the color of law and something would happen to me and I would die, the federal government in all likelihood would view that as an on-duty or a duty-related death, and hopefully compensate my wife well, I would hope.
Yeah. If you were doing something that was a police officer duty, then by definition you were on the job, whether you clocked in or not, I guess, in that case. So, did that, Anthony?
Sorry.
No, it's all right.
I think what you're trying to do, I think, I have one more thing to say. I think what you're trying to do is decide on a percentage
Mhm.
for the off-duty right now. Am I
Right.
correct? Okay. And I remember Matt said, well, if somebody's out skydiving, or if somebody's doing something that's not as crazy as that, that is not, skydiving is not an exclusion in this policy. I just want to bring that up. I mean, it's not an exclusion. So somebody could draw this disability from skydiving just like they could draw it from being, having cancer or anything else, because it is not laid out.
Yeah, and I am a little uncomfortable with an off-the-job injury, not knowing, like say you do fall off a ladder and you come in and you broke your leg and you need to be off duty or whatnot. That just is, to me, it's fundamentally different than performing your duties and getting an injury.
Well, and it's hard for me to get to because, what jobs out there do you get hurt mowing your yard at home that your work pays for it?
Mhm.
Period. That's where it's kind of hard to okay, we're going to pay them 100%. Where not very many, I don't know of any place that pays you for off when you're at home if you get hurt.
Yeah.
Any company, I don't care where you work, you get hurt at home, your insurance might cover it, but not pay.
But we have some phenomenal employees, and we want to keep them.
Sure.
And,
No,
and recruit them
Right.
any way we
Yeah.
can. Yeah.
But just for perspective.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
The general public's going to look at it like, wow, I get hurt at home, I don't get anything.
Right.
I don't know of any company that does that, honestly.
Right.
Do you have anything? You're uncharacteristically, I can't talk,
I thought it was.
quiet this
I
evening.
am uncharacteristically quiet. That means it's bad because I'm thinking. I'm a physician who signs off on short-term disability, and so for me, what the spectrum of what could put a person on short-term disability is never going to be equalized. It's never, we're doing the best we can to have a catch-all to cover. I fell down while I was mowing. I skydove. Is that correct?
Sounds good
Grandma?
to
I
me.
get it. Yeah.
Or I, contracted a chronic illness, or I have some kind of terminal illness. When I'm looking at it from a physician's perspective, short-term disability is much different than cancer or chronic illness. Short-term disability is supposed to cover a one-time injury, a one-time illness. It isn't the same as cancer, so we would be compensating something that's supposed to be short-term. That's why it's short-term disability. So I wouldn't even look at cancer as
As being part of this.
excluded as what we're doing as part of this, because it's so far outside of what I believe as a physician is the spectrum of short-term disability. So I know that we keep coming back to that, but I feel like a person, if they're having issues with chronic or terminal illness, that's a whole different beast than this is.
So,
Does that make sense?
yeah, that does actually, and I feel like that actually kind of clarifies things for me personally, because now, thinking of that, what would fall in short-term disability is going to, probably the vast majority, be like if you get in a car accident or something like that. Because I'm trying to think of an illness then that would fall under short-term versus the long-term.
Well, if you go to section 1.2 on this is their definition of disability or disabled, so.
Yeah, so I'll just go ahead and read that for the public and people here. Section 1.2, disability or disabled means an employee's inability as a result of non-work-related accident or sickness for which the employee is under the regular care of a physician to perform the material and substantial duties of his or her regular job or another job arranged and approved by the city, with or without reasonable accommodation. Determination of disability shall be made by the administrator based on the receipt. Then we get into some of the back and forth, so I'll stop there. Which actually,
That's the broad.
yeah, and that kind of actually answers Anthony's question a little bit there too, because it's whether you're getting compensated or not if you're performing the duties mandated by the city, which I would say then in the instance that you brought up, that does fall in there, so.
Based on your definition, though, doesn't cancer fall right in that category?
I think what.
Not as a short term.
We talked about a sickness and a...
More often than not, you have to be in short term before you qualify for long.
I agree.
I understand that. So I don't want you to think
agree.
that we're being, what's a diplomatic way of saying hard?
Obstinate?
Obstinate? About
was
that.
easier for me to understand, but...
I'm not sure what you mind.
Usually and I want you to know where I'm coming from. I'm coming from the perspective of a physician who signs these papers for disability. When I'm looking at this is a chronic or a terminal illness, it's going to be short-term disability only for a short period of time before it gets bumped up to something else entirely. So that person should be, I don't know what that's going to be. It's outside of what's on the agenda for tonight, for what that would look like.
And I will say that in preparing for this, I did not look at long-term disability. So I'm woefully undereducated when it comes to how long-term fits into this, and I do apologize for that.
So just for some clarification here, you'd mentioned talking about, to qualify for this, you need to have a physician's certificate saying basically that I can't come to work.
Mhm.
And then, but there's realistically, outside of that, there's no mention of anything having to do with the city's physician, and then a third physician.
That's under,
Through this, can you tell me?
No,
That's
it is, it's right
1.2.
here in the same 1.2.
the one that I was just reading, where I stopped, that's where that came in. So it's that last,
It
Like-
says the administrator will require, did you see it? Okay.
So has the city chosen a physician at this point?
no. And I don't know if that's something that we would choose a standard or a de facto physician. I don't think that it's necessary.
I don't even know if you could just choose a physician, because if it's a back problem, would you choose a different physician as if if it was
Right,
a
I think it
headache?
would be
I'm not,
circumstantial because
I'm not sure that you could.
Your regular
I don't know.
general physician is not gonna know if you've got chronic back pain.
Yeah, I
They're
don't
gonna send
know.
you to a specialist.
That's a
It
whole
would
nother
just be
can of
more of
worms.
those, if there was a doubt of somebody trying to take advantage of the system, or it just makes it such an inconvenience, they're not even gonna attempt that, you know?
That would be the hope. I
Right.
mean, we don't, obviously, we've never, as far as I know, the chief could probably, again, speak to that more than I can, but as far as I know, we've never had an issue with employees trying to take advantage of short-term disability.
Right.
I think the way they have this written, I think it helps protect the city from that happening.
And
No,
I,
and that's our job. I
And we
mean,
don't-
that's our job, is to protect the city. It's not anti anything, it's pro-city, that's all.
and I think that, like, just thinking realistically how it would play out, let's say that the employee had a general physician say that they did have a chronic back problem, and the city came back and said, well, no, I want the specialist, and they got the specialist to pay for the other opinion. And then if there was a difference between the two opinions, and it going to a third agreed-upon physician, that the third agreed-upon physician, the city would probably say, no, we want a specialist, you know what I mean? And then if that specialist agreed with the first specialist, or if he agreed with the general practitioner, you'd still, whatever that third physician said, then that's the one that would, is the one that we'd go with.
And then my question would be, if we ever, I cannot anticipate that we would ever get to this point, but in the event that we would have an employee where we have a split decision, so to speak, between my primary physician and a city physician, and we go to that third option,
Mhm.
do we know how that would be covered on my end? So let's say you decided you needed me to go to a specialist to
Mhm.
do that. Is my insurance gonna cover that?
Absolutely, your insurance covers everything pretty much anyway. I mean, you're still under the city's insurance.
I mean, if there was a,
Talking about out-of-pocket costs?
yeah,
I'm talking about coming out of my pocket, is my health insurance that I have now, if I already have a diagnosis from one doctor,
Mhm.
the city has paid out of taxpayer money, and so, to look at me for the exact same diagnosis, and we have a difference of opinion,
mhm.
is my insurance company, is Anthem gonna look at me and go, you've already got a diagnosis, buddy, why are you going to this doctor?
Well,
We're
yeah,
not
that's a,
gonna do
that's a
that."
very good
Right.
point.
Well,
Well, a lot of
and the way it
people
is-
Second opinions just on their own.
Yeah.
Without it being required by the city.
I would say
mean,
the
I've
way
been
that it
to
would work
doctors,
is
I'm like, I
Anthem
don't
would
agree with you,
require
and I
the
go to
first
another
doctor
one.
that
I've
you
never had
went
my
to
insurance.
to recommend you to
Yeah.
a specialist.
I'm just asking,
Yeah.
my question, I don't know,
It's a
I
good
can't
point.
foresee a situation
Right.
in which we ever arrive at this point, but if we do,
And-
that's my question.
yeah,
And-
and keep in mind, the third one is, the cost is split.
Right.
So, you know, whatever the cost is, it's only half.
And in the past, Matt, I've had Anthem, and I've done that same thing. I went, had my neck looked at by one person, I didn't like what they had to say. I went to another one, and I've never had them not pay it. I wanted my own, a second opinion for myself, and I never had them question it, so.
So, we are still at the question of the percentage of base pay for off the job.
Is this a number that we can come up with now without looking into it further? I mean,
Well, the only
Because
problem
this
is,
is off-duty, yes, it is. It's a number that you could come up with now.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. This policy isn't dictated by another insurance. This wouldn't go through an insurance, so it's just our decision.
I have a number in my head,
What's your number?
80%.
That, honestly, that's the number that I had in my head too. Kristen?
You guys came up with the 66,
Based on workman's comp's numbers.
okay. And anything above that, city pays.
Well, no, this policy will be 100% city regardless, because the workman's comp is only for work, this is only for, at
So that's
home.
fully out of the city's pocket.
Yeah, this policy will be fully out of the city's pocket, regardless. And as we've talked about before, this is money that's budgeted, within the city regardless, so the cost of the city is staffing, and if possible, overtime would be the cost incurred by that, if there was need for it.
Now, then there's gonna be stipulations on this, or how does this determine, like, it doesn't matter what your injury is, it would be whatever.
The stipulations are in the policy. And,
But I mean, I think Steve's asking, like, there's no differentiating from a accident or, you know, a car accident or a,
Just off-duty, that's all.
just,
Yeah, it's
just
just
what we
all
just
off-duty.
read, that
Yeah.
it basically
That's how
says.
broad it is, non-work-related
Okay, there is one line in here, let me see if I can find it, and it says excluding these things. Hold on. Okay, right here. The term disability does not include, 1, work-related injuries or illnesses, which we've already discussed, that this is not on the job stuff. 2, self-inflicted illness or injury. 3, an illness or injury resulting from participation in a war or other armed conflict, whether declared or undeclared. Or 4, an illness or injury resulting from participation in commission of an assault or felony.
so is the
It's
only,
like if you were in an accident because you were drinking and driving and that was a felony charge, is that what they're saying?
I think
yeah.
so,
You're
yeah.
not
Yeah.
paying for that.
If you're doing something that's against the law, we're not going to
There
pay
you
it.
go.
yeah.
I don't disagree with that.
Right.
So what do
So
you-
would what they do be considered an armed conflict?
I don't-
So, I mean,
Right.
If we run into that.
Well,
scenario
it
where
was-
off-duty,
Right.
But somebody's,
Was declared a war on drugs, so if you're off the,
Oh, snap.
I'm just kidding, guys.
So from the legal perspective, is there any reason to stay with or talk about certain numbers? Where is that coming from your perspective?
I'd say as far as off-duty, there really are no guidelines. It's whatever we want it to be. Whereas on duty, you have to deal with the workman's comp, perf issues. Here, we don't have to deal with any of that. Because perf would not be funding it, neither would workman's comp.
So,
I'm just asking questions.
No,
I'm
it's-
fine with the
and-
80% as well.
and I think we all kind of knew that going into this is going to be a long meeting, and I want this to be a discussion that we have in front of, you know, Anthony and Kara, so that the public understands how we came to it. And it's not like, why on earth would you give them this, or why didn't you give them that? This is, you know, this is the kind of debate that, and discussion I want us to have, that the public can, you know, get on TV or get on YouTube and see how we came to our conclusion.
And this is just a 2-hour discussion, continuation on what has been happening
Right.
every single
Yeah,
day
yeah.
for a long time.
Right.
Now, there's a
Yeah.
question here. Okay, so say for example, it is 80% for off-duty. And somebody gets hurt at work, and then they don't turn it in at work, and they go home and say, I got hurt at home, so I can get 80% instead of 66.
That's another argument to
Well,
not
but
make
then
one
we already
thing.
did say, though, that we're going to try to get on the job up to 100. Like, with this is going on that assumption that
We're going to
we're going
try.
Because right now, you obviously want to go home and get hurt.
Right, right. Yeah, but you know, in the discussions we have here tonight, the opinion of the board is we want to be at 100% for on the job, and we're going to continue figuring out the logistics of doing that. So this is going to be predicated on,
And I want to reiterate the fact that we want to does not. And so, I mean, I'm just,
but with that, I really don't believe that it's that we can't. I think it's just a matter of we're going to be the ones paying for that. And are we, and I, you know, I feel like we're, from what I gather from the board, is that we are comfortable funding that through the city to make sure that it is at 100. There will be details to be worked out with how we pay the insurance, whether we get a good deal or that, you know, we're, you know,
I
100%
just think
taking
that you
advantage
should
of
be
the.
clear when you say we're going to try to, because I don't want it to be misunderstood that you're guaranteeing that it's going to happen, and then somebody tells you, well, you said it was guaranteed and now you're not doing it. Because I understand what you're saying. I just wanted to make it very clear, since we are on the record, that we're,
I would say that short of Dustin telling the board legally, you cannot do this, I think we're going to do 100%. I mean, is that the,
If there's nothing legally that stops us from doing that, I don't know. I don't know what the details are on Ditch's side of it, of what with workman's comp and what you can and can't do and how that works. I don't know that.
because unless there is actually a law precluding us from doing that, then it's just a matter of the funding to do it.
that's all I'm saying, is we don't know if there's a law or not. I'm just saying, you know.
Well, nothing that we've encountered so far, and the amount of time we've spent on this says that we cannot do that. It's just that policies try to stop you from doing that through insurance. So,
Okay.
so, Mr. Anderson and
Ms.
Ms. I was going to say the mayor, but.
Oh,
I mean,
I wanted to go first.
Okay. It's been suggested 80, I think. I don't know why, but that kind of number that popped out to you, kind of popped with me. How do you feel about the number of 80%?
I'm fine with that.
Well, any last hurrah on 80%?
I'm not in a position right now to do that. We would reserve the right under state statute for the meet and confer law to negotiate that amount
Right.
for 2018 at a later date.
is it your feeling that 80% would be something that, I guess that's kind of hard for you to say.
I'm not in a position to tell you that at this
Right.
point. Whether I agree or disagree, I would just reserve the right under state statute to, under meet and confer, to negotiate that amount.
Gotcha. Okay. I understand. Is there anything you would like to say?
I know.
I have,
Okay. Chief?
Just thank you. Thank you for negotiating with us, talking to us,
Okay.
and negotiating with us.
Thank you for saying thank you. That was nice.
And I do appreciate that we have 3 city employees here, and they're from the police department, and so the turmoil and the time that you guys have spent here to argue your points as city employees has benefited all city employees, and I just want to make that clear too.
Thank you.
So, all right. I
Okay,
guess
so we're supposed to vote on this
this policy.
plan is in its entirety, so is there anything else that's in it that any of you have seen that you want to hash out before we have a vote on it?
Okay. So sorry, I'm trying to find exactly where it says in here, the percentage, so that we know exactly where we're going to be amending this policy.
Right here, 3.1.
3.1. Okay, thank you. All right, so why does my 3.1 not have that?
Yes.
Oh, because I'm looking at 1.3. Idiot. Yeah, I think I'm missing a page in mine.
I'm missing a
Yeah.
page.
What are you
Page two
missing?
is gone.
Yep, page 2 is gone.
Oh, let me see if I have a complete one here.
Son of a gun.
Let me see if they're all missing.
How'd you get the good copy?
Oh, page 2 is on
This
the
is all
back.
odd numbers.
Yep,
Printed
It's
from my email,
double-sided.
you know.
That was email.
yeah. I do have a copy of
Okay.
the entire thing, but it's double-sided and I put it in the.
Here's the single-sided if you need it.
Okay, so how about this? I will let you keep that for your records. We will use Kristen's copy for our records, if I can see that. All right, so,
Do you guys want to, you meant it to look
yes,
pretty?
if you don't mind.
No, not at all.
all right, so I guess with last chance for any further discussion on that.
Matt has it to review real quick.
Yeah, Matt's got that. First time we got to look at that part of it.
Gotcha. Would you like more time, Matt?
No, I think I've covered it. I think it's important, since we've not actually discussed this, in which this is part of something that we negotiated that is not changed on here. So we're not disagreeing, but I think it's important, at least for the public to know,
Right.
that this disability policy is only beneficial to the employee in a 4-year period. So for example,
Right.
if I were to go tomorrow, if I started short-term disability tomorrow and used all of the 50 weeks that I had coming to me, at whatever rate you guys decide that you're gonna compensate me at, if I use all 50 weeks, basically for the next 3 years,
You don't
I
have
will
a,
not have the opportunity to have that again. So it's, I think, again, it's not something where I can take a 1-year vacation, so to speak, if I figure out a way around the system, and then 2 years from now, say, you know what, I'd really like to be off for the entire summer, so I'm gonna take a 6-month vacation now. So that is not something that's available. that I think should be pointed out to the taxpayers, that I think that the city is, while trying to benefit the employee, is trying to safeguard the taxpayer money that would go to pay
Right.
us
Yeah.
from any type of abuse.
Yeah, because unlike any other policy, there would be no, any other policy, there would be no, well, you used it once, now you don't get to use it for another 4 years. In the city constructed policy, there is that stipulation
Correct.
to prevent any fraud or abuse.
I have no questions.
All right. Well, I will go ahead and ask for a motion to amend the short-term disability plan and have it under section 3.1, where it currently says 66.67%, say 80%.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
We also have Resolution 8 on the agenda if this passed.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Do you have the agenda up there?
Thanks.
It's just changing the handbook because
Right.
the old policy was in the handbook, so.
Okay, thank you. I did forget about that. All right, do I have a motion to accept the City of Peru short-term disability plan as amended?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so that, do we need to now do a resolution or? Okay.
I would like to make a motion to pass Resolution 8.
2017?
Yes.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so then the resolution is to, it repeals Appendix D of the Employee Handbook for the City of Peru, which then replaces it with the plan that we just approved. So that's just a switching of previous plan, new plan in the Employee Handbook. So, all right. Is there anything else to come before the board? A motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.